Hi everyone, it's Kelsey from the blog westmanacademyhomeschool.com, and today we are going to be making Einkorn Brioche bread. As you can see, my daughter is very upset that I did not let her wash and crack the eggs, but the first thing we are going to do is whisk our eggs. This is done preferably in a hand mixer or handheld mixer because you want the eggs to be whisked to where they create that fluff or kind of like a meringue texture. So we're placing 4 eggs in our stand mixing bowl, and I'm going to mix it for roughly 3 to 5 minutes until I get the consistency of a foamy or fluffy egg mixture. I also apologize if you can hear children in the background. So I took 1 cup of hot water. I just took it from the sink. Make sure it's not boiling or it will kill the yeast. But you want to make sure that it's warm enough that it activates the yeast. Then we added 2 tablespoons of just active dry yeast. You can use fast rising yeast if you have it. I had my son whisk it until it was dissolved, and then we added it into the egg mixture. Then we're going to be adding 1/4 cup of sugar, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 2 sticks of melted butter, which I did not add until after I mixed the dough with the flour. So make sure that you add that butter during this stage before you add the flour. Using the same measuring cup, I'm just adding 1/2 cup of milk, and then my son is going to whisk everything together. Make sure, again, that you add your melted butter at this point, because adding it once the dough has been created like I did not work super well, and I think that is part of the reason that my dough didn't bake as well as it usually does. Then after he mixes this together, we're going to slowly add in our flour. So because this makes 3 loaves, it does take a bit of flour. With einkorn flour, it also will use up more than your all-purpose flour. But I did a combination. I did about 5 cups of einkorn flour and 2 cups of all-purpose flour. The key to this is just adding the 1 cup of all-purpose during the dough mixing stage, and then adding that last 1 cup when you are kneading it on the surface. Now, if you are not going to hand knead your dough at all, then add all the flour together, but finishing off kneading the dough with the all-purpose is going to help it so that it is less sticky. Einkorn flour tends to be more sticky than just traditional all-purpose flour. So I'm changing from the whisk attachment to the dough attachment, and I am just slowly adding in more and more einkorn flour, and then eventually my all-purpose flour. I'm going to remove the dough, hand knead it, and at the end you'll see me add 1 cup of all-purpose flour to finish it off to create the ball, and then place it in the oven at 95 degrees Fahrenheit. I allowed my dough to rise roughly 2 hours. Just watch it. Once it has doubled in size, you know it is ready to go. Then I just take my fingers and I remove the dough from the edges of the bowl. Einkorn is a stickier dough, so it is fine if it is stickier than the dough that you are used to. All I do is take small sections and I roll it on the surface like I did when we had the big giant dough loaf and I made a ball to have it rise. I just make mini versions of that and I just pinch all of the dough to the bottom, make sure that the top is nice and flat, and I'm just placing 6 in each of the bread loaf pans. This is also how I make rolls. This is how I make buns. I just make tiny balls, make sure they're pinched at the bottom and smooth at the top. So I did initially have parchment paper and aluminum foil covering my loaf pans, but I decided that since I was making brioche bread and the little balls don't really sit well on the parchment paper, at least in my bread pans, I made sure that they were just well seasoned, well oiled, and I didn't have any problems with it sticking to the sides. Once again, you are going to allow your dough to rise until it has doubled in size. Be very careful with this buttering part. I think I put on too much butter. I had so much left over that I just kept packing it on, and it started to flatten my rised dough. Sorry, that is my daughter. So be very gentle when you're adding the butter to the top and make sure that you don't pack on too much like I did. Einkorn also doesn't rise in the oven, so if you are expecting a rise like a normal all-purpose flour, once it has risen and then you place it in the oven, it usually still gets bigger, but with Einkorn it doesn't, and I found that my loaves even flattened a little bit. This might have been due to the fact that I added my butter afterwards, and the butter helps to make it nice and fluffy. So me adding that in later might have affected how my dough rose. I have made this before and I have gotten these beautiful puffy loaves. So it's the only thing that I can think that I did differently, but they still turned out delicious, very beautiful. I did take off the tin foil as you saw and put them back in the oven. I put them in for 5 minutes and I actually think that they got a little too brown, so I recommend either putting your loaf in without the tin foil at the beginning or just placing it in the oven without the tin foil for 3 minutes instead. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, I make videos on homeschool, homemaking, and creating a wholesome home.